What have we learned in the 2 years since we lost Roe versus Wade?
We have learned that the impact of overturning Roe versus Wade is far bigger than anything anyone imagined at this moment 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we were talking about what this would mean for women who wouldn't have access to abortion, women who wanted to terminate a pregnancy. But think about the stories we've heard since then. As 10-year-old girls have come forward, 12-year-old girls, 15-year-olds, 30-year-olds who've been raped, as we've heard more from people who have wanted pregnancies but are miscarrying, who have something has gone terribly wrong in that pregnancy, of people who need access to IVF in order to have a family. We're hearing the stories of our sisters, our cousins, our friends, the people we went to school with. Shoot, we're hearing the stories from ourselves about what it means for an extremist group to drive access to abortion, to contraception, to IVF out of the American medical system. We are learning what it means person by person across this country. And I got to tell you, I'm out here in Wisconsin right now, and people are fired up to fight back.
What would it take to legislate Roe versus Wade, pass it as federal legislation and get it signed into law?
Oh, I love this question because we are close. So what it will take is, first and foremost, we've got to have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House. If we want to preserve access to abortion, then we've got to have Joe and Kamala. We also need a majority in the United States House of Representatives. We think we're close. We think we can do this, but it means we got to be in that fight. And the third one is we've got to have a majority in the Senate. We've got to have 50 Democrats who are willing to set aside the filibuster and say, your vote matters. We are going to depend on democracy, and we are going to make Roe versus Wade law of the land. Understand this, Lawrence. We are so close. Come November, if we can get those three parts, I think of it as the trifecta, we can make Roe versus Wade law of the land. Not just in blue states, not just in purple states, but all across this nation.
I've observed on this program that if there is another Trump presidency, it seems to me he would have very little difficulty in getting Clarence Thomas's resignation from the Supreme Court. He could go into a happy, well-funded retirement. Donald Trump could replace Clarence Thomas with a 40-year-old judge, possibly Judge Cannon in Florida, who could serve another 40 years on the Supreme Court. So it is entirely possible that another 40 years of rulings by the Supreme Court could be at stake in this presidential election.
Absolutely. And understand, that's Roe, that's contraception, that's IVF, but it is so much more. It's about voting rights in this country. It's about the ability to join a union. It's about our climate. It's about money in politics. It's about corporate power. It's about a Supreme Court that in the past few years has just jumped the curbs, a Supreme Court that has put itself above the Constitution, has put itself above democracy itself, and is driving an extremist agenda. It is absolutely critical that we reelect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, in no small part because they will be the ones to appoint the next round of Supreme Court justices. People who'll bring some balance back to the court, who will restore some credibility in that court, and who will make sure that we understand we are a nation of laws. Supreme Court has a role to play, absolutely. But so does Congress, and so does the President of the United States. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they are the people who will strengthen and support our democracy. And that includes taking this extremist Supreme Court, making sure that we've got better people in that court, and, in my view, expanding the court as needed. if this court is going to continue to try to run roughshod over our democracy.
As a former Harvard Law School professor, where, of course, you were talking about the work of the Supreme Court all the time in class, as you've seen the work of the Supreme Court for the last 2 years and prior in your time in the Senate, what has to happen to this court going forward?
Look, what's happened on this court most recently is truly deeply shocking. This is a court that no longer feels bound by law. It's also a court whose some of its members just feel like they don't have any ethical constraints, that they can take money from interested parties, that they don't even have to disclose what's going on. We need to do a couple of things in Congress. The first thing that we need to do is we need to put ethical rules in place that bind the Supreme Court. We have constitutional authority to do that, and we should do it. My view also is that it's time to expand the Supreme Court. The Constitution provides for that. It's happened 7 times in the past. We have a Supreme Court that is way out of balance. It's a Supreme Court that has become an extremist court that no longer limits itself to stare decisis. It no longer limits itself to the Constitution itself and to the power to be exercised by Congress and by the President of the United States. We need to save our democracy. And part of saving our democracy is making sure that this extremist Supreme Court does not destroy it.